his kids play for Clemson. I knew this was going to be very easy for me.
So what are your overall?
Does this feel like a national championship game as opposed to just a semifinal?
It does, because of the qualification of the two teams. I look back at games in the past that have had this much star power with teams that roll in with winning streaks like this, and the only parallel that I can find what I've covered with the Texas USC Rose Bowl. The star power of those two teams, Vince Young, Reggie Bush, Matt Leinart, both on huge win streaks. Obviously it was a championship game. This isn't, so it can't feel the same. You talk about 28 versus 19, 5 of the top 9 vote getters in the Heisman Trophy. And it's got individual star power. It's got two teams on a collision course. It's got history. Clemson's chasing something that's very special in the history of the entire sport. 3 out of 4. Ohio State's trying to get back where they think they belong. So in terms of storylines and star power, I haven't seen many like this.
Toss-up game?
Toss-up game? There are no true toss-up games. You got to find that edge somewhere. I think Clemson's favored for a reason, to be honest with you. I think that you can count on the guys that are the core leaders of that team, especially on offense, kind of delivering in a big game. I don't discount the fact that Lawrence and Etienne and a lot of those guys who were a part of the championship last year have put together an almost perfect performance in the championship game against Alabama and beat them by 4 touchdowns. For Ohio State, they answered a lot of questions against Wisconsin coming off the canvas in their first real postseason game for that group of guys. But to me, I just wouldn't bet against Trevor Lawrence in these situations. And I think that Clemson is favored for a reason. Doesn't mean it's not a very close competitive game. We sure hope it is, man. I mean, that's what we're all here for, to see a close game.
How big is familiarity, being there playing this game?
I think it counts a lot. I mean, in 30 years of doing this, I've seen plenty of postseason games won with experience and just a steady hand in the big stage. You talk to all the players and coaches who've been through this. There's a jump in intensity from regular season to conference championship. There's another jump to the semifinals, another jump to the championship. If you don't come out and match that energy and that intensity early on and then sustain it, you don't win. And I think Alabama got caught last year in a Clemson avalanche. The Tigers came out, made big plays early, got momentum going, and Alabama sort of tapped out, which is something we hadn't seen before. If you can make Alabama tap out, you can do anything in this sport. So I think that for that reason, the Clemson is a proven commodity in that department. Ohio State needs to be very aware early on and come out, execute well, be intense, and impose themselves and not get punched in the mouth quickly, because I think we can see playoff games get away from one side if they're not ready from the jump.
Chris, do you think Chase Young can be nullified maybe, as he was limited a little bit in the last 2?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Tremaine Ankrum, the tackle for Clemson, we had a long talk with him. He's very proud of his technique. He's very confident in his ability to block anybody. I think they'll give him a chance to see what he can do one-on-one. If that doesn't work out, they'll try to help him out there. But I think that you talk to Chase, I mean, he's NFL ready. He just has the demeanor of a 5-year All-Pro, and I think he's worked hard. I think he's well aware that he didn't have his best games down the stretch, and they'll study and they'll find ways. And if he is nullified, it opens things up for the other guys. But he's going to be a game plan dictator regardless of whether or not he shows up on the stat sheet. He has a way of, I think, influencing the game, even if it's not a sack, just by a pressure and maybe moving the launch point, opening things up for other guys. And I'm really eager to see the game within the game with Chase against their edge pass protectors.
Are you surprised he can occupy almost 3 people sometimes?
No, I'm not surprised, because he's one of the special guys I've seen in 3 decades covering the sport. I mean, it's a very short list of guys who have been that good at that position. Like I said, he just reminds me of the guy, the way he plays, the way he acts and carries himself, that you'd see on Sunday. And I think that's where he's headed, and I think he's going to have a really successful career in the pros. And I'm happy to be able to watch him 1 or 2 more games, because he's also a hell of a lot of fun to talk to. You learn a lot from him. He approaches the game like he's already a pro. Every detail about his game, from diet to rest to recovery to the technique of his opponents. I mean, he's so detail-oriented, and he has been mentored beautifully by the Boses and by Larry Johnson. I've never quite seen anyone at his level. And I thought it was awesome that he was a Heisman finalist, because it's long overdue that guys on that side of the ball get recognized. So he enjoyed himself in New York. I think he got something out of it, and it was good for the sport to have him there.
At the NC State game, when you called it, you said you thought Travis Etienne was the best running back in the country, and it wasn't close. You still feel that way?
Did I say it wasn't close?
Something like that.
I do think he's the best running back in the country. I think it's hard to judge a guy that's carried it, 6 times in the fourth quarter and has never really had to dig deep. I do think there's something to be said for a running back that has to carry the ball 25, 30 times and the game is on him. So Jonathan Taylor comes to mind. I would never say he's not a deserving Doak Walker Award winner because so much of the offense is run through him, and Travis is a piece of Clemson's amazing puzzle. But I do think when it comes to acceleration and strength, yards after contact, 5.3 is what ETN brings. So I don't know that it's not close. I think Dobbins is right there with him. I think it's an interesting question. Who would you take, Lawrence and ETN or Fields and Dobbins? I think that's, to Ohio State fans, their answer would be clear. Clemson fans would be clear. Us neutrals, it's an interesting barstool conversation.
So you think the first half against Wisconsin maybe is a little bit of a red flag?
Well, I think Fields wasn't healthy, so I think if he didn't have a quote-unquote excuse or he wasn't playing with something that was clearly on his mind and hurting his mobility, I have to say I watched that game back on the plane for about the third time, and it does give you pause because Wisconsin's offense was hurting Ohio State with speed. And Cephas was having success, Jeff Cephas were having success, some things that Clemson can bring a lot more dangerous fashion than Wisconsin. I'd be a little concerned. I think if you look at that game versus the way Clemson has been consistently dominant except for one game this year, that's sort of the reason why they're favored. But that doesn't mean that, a 60-minute fist fight, Ohio State won't play better. I think they need to play better than they did in that game, clearly.
Dabo said that these two teams are almost mirror images of each other. Would you agree with that, or what's your thought on that?
That sounds like the kind of thing coaches say in a press conference. I don't think they're mirror images. I think they each bring talent. I think that the way they're built is very, very similar. They're built with elite talent, 4- and 5-star players, recruiting classes that are at or near the top every single season, and then they're developed spectacularly with resources at both programs that are unsurpassed in the sport. So from that standpoint, I think the programs, one in the North, one in the South, are built very similarly, and they've dominated in a similar fashion. But I don't know, mirror image means they're identical, and I don't see that.
How will the Clemson defense get the upper hand on the Buckeyes, in your opinion?
Well, I think by stopping the run, there's no mystery. They're going to load up and stop the run. That's what Brent Venables does. There's no one, and Dabo expressed this, there's no one you trust more in this situation, getting a defense prepared for weeks at a time for a big game than Brent Venables at this point. He's coached in 7 national championship games. He's won a couple in recent years. His defenses have been ready, and they've shut down some really effective offenses. I think if you stop the run game, if Fields is not able to move with his usual explosiveness, if the quarterback run game is not a part of the equation for Ohio State, to me that's big trouble. So they'll try to negate the run game and then take their chances on the edge. I think that Ohio State's receivers are very good. Are they at Clemson's level as a core? It'd be hard to make that argument. So the challenge is very real because it's very tough to stop JK running it behind the tip of the spear, as Ryan Day calls it. Guard, center guard is devastating. And that part of the offensive line, Ohio State's been able to control games right there. Now, if they can control this one right there, I like their chances. But I look forward to the chess match because Brent's a proven guy. Ryan Day is a brilliant in-game adjuster, probing and looking for weaknesses in the defense. I think he does it as well as anybody, even though he's sort of new to the big stage as a play caller. Look forward to watching that unfold because they're both really, really good at probing for weakness and then exploiting it.
What player do you think would be an X factor that nobody's really talking about?
I don't know. Galloway comes back for Clemson, so you get the tight end who's been suspended for an entire year, a very athletic tight end that can get vertical. Jordan Leggett kind of comes to mind when Clemson had that kind of a player. Deshaun Watson's offense was even more dangerous. They haven't had that kind of a player this season. Can a guy who's so rusty, hasn't played in more than a year, be a factor? Remains to be seen, but I think if Ohio State's not aware of him being back in the game, the athletic component that he brings to it, the ability to get downfield and find a mismatch. No one's talking about him, but I keep an eye on him out of the tight end position maybe, and obviously in these big games, what's fun about it is guys come out of nowhere and become stars, and when the marquee guys are getting lots of attention, other guys get a chance to make a play. Hunter Renfrow, was that guy before anyone knew how good he was in the playoff, and I think that's what's fun for us to see who's going to emerge. It's not a big star already.
Is there anything to the Clemson softer schedule argument, or is that negated by the fact that they played so many elite games over the last couple of years?
Well, the Clemson schedule, i.e. the strength or lack of it in the ACC, is a fact. That isn't even debatable. They did play in a weaker conference. Fact. Now, that doesn't mean they're not a great team. I mean, except for one game where they sort of kind of mailed it in against North Carolina until the last minute, that could have been their danger game. But I mean, look at what's going on in the conference. Even look at the bowl performances. I mean, the ACC is not at the level of the Big Ten or the SEC, and it's not close. Doesn't mean a great team can't come out of that conference. But when you're judging teams, I refuse to believe it's a disrespect for Clemson. I just don't see it that way. It's a motivational tool that Dabo uses. I might use it too if I were a coach. He's as good at motivating players as anybody, so you use whatever you got. His players were sub for awards, use that. We're voted third, use that. Because you got to keep guys sharp who've won 28 in a row and crushing people. But if you're going to rank teams based on resumes, look what LSU has done and Ohio State's done. They've just done it against better competition. So that's, I think, when you're splitting hairs, and Clemson's favored in the game. Having said that, I wouldn't worry too much what the committee thinks. The people in Vegas, that's their job to decide who the favorite is. And they've decided in this game that Clemson's the favorite. So, I mean, you search for motivational tools where you can find them, and Dabo's pretty good at it.
Chris, not to throw a curveball at you, but feel like in the cheese.
I could never hit a curveball.